I was a part of a futures group in March, and we were putting down, what are we seeing? What do we think is going to happen? I was one of two women. It was mostly guys. And it was interesting to see because nobody put down in March that educators would retire. They would rather retire than teach in the classroom for fear of their health. Right.
Yeah.
And they didn't think about, the potential brain drain in education, whether it's primary or higher ed. And certainly the conversations in terms of different boards that I was on, in August and September was like a lot of teachers just didn't want to go back. Because it turns out when you look at the demographics of teachers in this country, they tend to be older.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They've been teaching for 25 years. They're like in their 50s, late 50s. They pre-existing conditions, so on and so forth. And they're going like, I don't know about this. and a lot of teachers were retiring. They were just saying like, or I'm
Yep.
just going to step away. I'm not willing to put myself at risk.
Yep.
We didn't anticipate that. And there was also a lot of talk about, we're finally going to do online education. It's going to be great and it's going to be fabulous. And let me tell you, nobody likes online education.
No,
you know,
you're exactly right.
So this utopia of this is going to be great and colleges are going to be radically changed. And I had a co-op of 30 students from an East Coast university, and they were just all going like, oh my God, this is awful. And the professors that were interacting with this, like, oh my God, this is awful. Like everyone was finding Zoom classrooms to be exhausting. And it just didn't, they weren't learning as much. And it turns out that for higher ed isn't just the class. If it was just like classroom learning, then everyone would be on Coursera,
Yep.
right? But it's about the social emotional learning. It's about the opportunities of leadership in terms of different student activities and groups and clubs. And it's not just, the curriculum is part of the education, but it's not the entirety of the education. And when you
Yep.
strip that all out, all of a sudden this seems really not enough.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I totally agree. And I think, I was kind of hoping, selfishly with kids that are doing the virtual learning that someone would figure it out over the summer and things would be better. And it didn't happen. And I think the problem is we just tried to take what we do and what we know and apply it to a digital model. And the same thing happened
Right.
with like government services, right? It was just a lift
Yeah.
and a shift and the expectation that it was just going to work. We'll just do it virtually. And I think we haven't taken the time to reevaluate and reimagine, how those should look. And I mean, part of the research that I've been doing now actually isn't just on like the impact of the pandemic, but the impact on the behavioral shifts that have happened from consumers. So like, what are they using? What are they downloading? I mean, we saw really interesting shifts, before the pandemic, mobile was everything, as we saw, right? Everyone was consuming information. They'd be on a bus, they'd do that. Now, large screen usage has gone up. Like the way we experience and interact with information has shifted, where now we expect bigger real estate. We want more immersive experiences. And, we're still creating content for a mobile world that's not mobile anymore, tiny screen. And so I think that we have to kind of reimagine everything now and really look at, how to adapt it, how to optimize it. And it's an ongoing thing. And it's something that, these behavioral shifts are going to continue to happen. And, even after this pandemic is under control, I think that, we were on an exponential curve for technology and behaviors followed pretty quickly behind that. But I think now they're very much in line. And if not doubly exponential, things are changing so rapidly, expectations are changing. There's going to be something that emerges out of this. And so I think for the entrepreneurs that are out there, don't look at how things are structured today or how they were structured before the pandemic and try to create a digital version of it. No one wants that. And as we know, it's not sustainable. Use this as an opportunity to reimagine what things could be and what they should look like, and how technology can be applied in an experiential way to, whether it's educate someone, whether it's solve a government problem, whatever it might be. I think that's the opportunity. And for agencies, I mean, now's the opportunity to really rethink how you plan. I mean, look at how we plan transportation infrastructure, right? We lay down things, on the road to count cars, we do things, but where do we factor in e-commerce and self-driving vehicles and all of these different converging themes and the impact that's going to have on our underlying transportation infrastructure. We're building infrastructure and we're building services using planning models that were created for a very different world. And so I think everything now has changed, both from a private sector standpoint, but also for the public sector. And so the rules of how you do this, I think, are being written today. And so it's an opportunity to kind of question everything and experiment a lot. I mean, I was just talking to a friend of mine, Mitch Weiss. He wrote a book called We the Possibility. And that's kind of the point that he makes was, you know, we have to move from a probability government to a possibility government and look at experimentation and failures as a part of the process, right? And we have to find ways to move into this area that we can't define today.
So how do we create a government with an experimental mindset, right? Given that they're so process oriented, like, you know, but my day-to-day business is working with the citizens, and, you know, many cities, you know, have barely enough staff, right? So where do they find the headroom to say we're going to be creative, we're going to experiment, and knowing, as you and I well know, a lot of the experiments don't work, right? Most things don't work. That's just kind of the name of the game. But you do learn from those failures to go like, okay, so this failed behaviorally, or this failed technologically, or this failed economically. I mean, but you need to figure out what those variables are and then take all that information to inform you about how to go forward, right? You know, if you're a young person and you want to go and you want to help reinvent government, what would you suggest as a path in? How would you design your career to do that?
That's a good question. I mean, one, I would say, you know, first of all, don't believe all of the myths that you hear about the public sector not being a place for it. Because I think, you know, as our past has proven, you know, you can do some amazing things. There's so many amazing public sector innovators that are out there, whether it's, you know, through New Urban Mechanics or the San Francisco Mayor's Office of Civic Innovation. I mean, there's just so much innovation that's happening across the country, even in like transportation agencies like LA Metro. I have a good friend that's CIO there that's doing incredible work. So understand that, you know, government can be innovative, and it's actually, you know, something, you know, innovation is bred from a lot of constraint, and government has a lot of constraints, so we can do that. I mean, I think in order to make innovation stick, you have to have a time and a place for it, right? Like if you treat innovation like you treat your mission and value statements, and you know, you just read it once when you join the organization and never, you know, circle back, or if it just becomes some tagline that's printed on or painted on your wall, like nothing's going to happen. If you want to create a time and place for it, you have to be serious. You have to look at actually creating the time and a place for it. And so a place could be like an organization, like an Office of Civic Innovation or an innovation lab or something else. And it may sound gimmicky, but they actually show the seriousness of your willingness to experiment, and they create a place where it's safe to do that. The time side of things, you know, tell your employees, you know, don't do unnecessary meetings on Fridays. Spend, you know, half of your Friday actually coming up with a better way of doing something, or reevaluating what you're doing, or just reading. I mean, so much innovation can come from external stimuli. So, you know, there's a number of jurisdictions out there that do like virtual lunch series where they'll bring in a guest speaker from, you know, another agency or a company or somewhere just to share what they're doing. So find a way to do that. I think executive sponsorship is also really key. So, you know, you can have, you know, someone in the organization that says we're going to be the most innovative ever, but if, you know, the city manager, the mayor, the elected officials aren't on board with it, you know, things aren't going to work out, because it's got to be something that everyone holds holistically as a vision, right? And then they have to have a shared, you know, BHAG, a big, hairy, audacious goal. I think funding is important, but not a requirement. So, you know, funding kind of comes down with that time and a place dynamic. You like LA created an innovation fund at one point where they helped fund employee ideas. I mean, that shows the seriousness of actually trying to find better ways of doing things by actually putting cash, you know, towards that. I think that there's other ways to do that, but, you know, funding definitely comes, you know, in mind. So if you're looking at helping government do that, I think one, you know, identify whatever the agency is near you and just start plugging into their public meetings and other things, and understand and kind of just be a sponge at first to understand what they're dealing with and what they're up against. I mean, we all see things from the outside that we think should be fixed, like, man, this road sucks, or, you know, they should have invested money there. But to understand the real challenges of government, you have to kind of do your homework before you go in. And so understand the nuances of the agency, understand what they're up against, understand their budget, those types of things. The good news is government is a very transparent industry, and all of that stuff is legally required to be put online in most cases. So go and read and find it. and then find ways to align yourself with your expertise, your ideas, your skill set to things that could be solved by you're adding to their conversations, or whatever it is they're trying to accomplish. And so align yourself with where they're going, their priorities, those types of things. And then it's a relationship thing. Build relationships. I mean, reach out to, like, I've done a number of just virtual coffees with government leaders over the pandemic, and they want to share, they want to also absorb. And so find ways to just build those relationships, and then plug in. And don't be discouraged if you're in an agency today and your management's not on board, or your mayor is never going to be on board. Like, don't see that as a reason why you can't do it. Just understand that you may have to lead the charge, and you may have to choose to prove that these things work, and to take those and to kind of tell that story, and to educate people above you and below you with the value of doing that. So we've seen time and time again people that have been kind of clerks that have worked their way up to much higher level positions just by demonstrating the proficiency for experimentation and innovation in their own job. So you don't have to be a C-level in government in order to make things happen. In fact, as we've seen with crowdsourcing,
you could be 19 years old.
Yeah, I mean, as you've seen with crowdsourcing and ideation, it's the edge. And yeah, I mean, I was an accidental public servant, and so, I was fortunate to be surrounded by really smart people like you that were able to, that were able to collaborate with me, and we did some pretty incredible work. But I think, it takes a village in that case. So don't go at it alone, and tap into, your partners and your ecosystem. And if your local universities don't pay attention to you, then reach out to Stanford.
That's right. That's right. We had a lot of fun. I remembered when we did the C-Click fix, and after the Haiti earthquake, right? And we said, like, wait a minute, we can connect it in these really clever ways. And we actually set up
we tested so much stuff. And I mean, there's a chapter in the governor of California's book about Manor, Citizenville. He wrote a book about the story of Manor. It's I think it's chapter 8 in his book. So I mean, I think there's so much. Yeah, I mean, if we did it in a very small city at that time,
with no budget,
right? With no budget. And with a lot of calls for a lot of free things, anybody can do.
We were kind of nervy.
Yeah. So, but it was fun. And I think, and it can be fun. And I think that, when you look at the workforce challenges of the public sector, and the fact that people are getting burnt out, and they're just like, in education, they're choosing to retire also just because they don't want to deal with the complexities of things now. This can be a great way to empower people to stick around and to share all of the experience they've gathered over the years, to diffuse that within the organization, to, take on kind of a new role and to push that forward. And so I think, innovation, when done right, isn't one person's job. It's everyone's job. And it's something that should be empowering to everybody, regardless of where they're at in the organization and regardless of what their background is. So I think there's so much opportunity.
So I have a question for you, Dustin. So I've been doing the deep dive on venture studios. I'm on the board of one, and I was just so intrigued. So I've been looking, and I've got my co-op interns just doing, as I said, like, give me the map of all the venture studios and all the niches that they're in, because they're hyper specialized. Have you seen any venture studios focused around government and government needs? Government as a customer?
Yeah, there's quite a few funds that are focused on GovTech. Not necessarily the studio model around it, but I mean, you're seeing, like, there's the GovTech fund, which isn't affiliated with our GovTech, but a close partner that invests just in companies focused on state and local government. There's a GovTech accelerator called CivStart that takes on companies, and they focus on helping them have the infrastructure necessary to scale. I mean, e.Republic is a venture arm as well, where we look at early stage companies and we try to help catalyze them in the market and help them, move the needle of public sector innovation. So you're starting to see more specialization on GovTech from a kind of investment standpoint, and also an underlying infrastructure standpoint. So that's super encouraging, because 5 years ago, I mean, even like when we did our first GovTech 100, I mean, people were like, what? People are focusing on state and local government as their primary customer. Like, why would you do that? And, and be a startup? Like, why would you build a company there? But now, we're seeing so much incredible work. Our new GovTech 100 drops in January, early January. So 100 more companies that we put online at govtech.com/100. And it's not a pay to play model. No one has to write us a check for any of that stuff. It's just companies that have been curated by the market that are moving the needle. I mean, there's a company called BioBot Analytics that analyzes sewage. They were using that to fight the opioid epidemic. They pivoted during the pandemic to really look at how do we analyze where the COVID hotspots are, leveraging the same database. I mean, just so, like incredible work and science and other things that are just happening with all these companies. So
Sounds exciting. So yeah, I was thinking like, oh gosh, if we had a venture studio and then came up with our own ideas for government innovation, just
yeah,
and then having like a group of state or local governments, pay in, and then because we want to be the customer.
yeah.
We will be first in line to be the customer for whatever you come up with, and it's a collaborative. Like we need this built. This company or this solution needs to exist, right?
Yeah.
As opposed to an entrepreneur saying, I think I have a solution for you, right? So it's a little
Yeah.
bit tighter
Yeah. We're
fit.
seeing some of that innovation with, I think there's, still a lot of room for those types of studios, but we are seeing kind of in the front end of the procurement process, rather than like government procurement is complex, right? And as you know, like you can put out a request for information to kind of gather the specifications needed, and then a request for proposals, and you got to have a team that kind of writes all that stuff. But we're starting to see like more of like request for ideas, and here's our challenge. How do we, like, what are some creative ways of solving this? How should we look at that? So you've got, like whether it's Urban Leap or City Mart or others like the Atlas in the space that are all trying to understand, quantify, like marketplace.city, like how do we solve these types of challenges that are out there, that we may not have the answers to, and that we may not even be able to go to procurement on yet because we don't know what we don't know. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for that. And the good news about government too is if you do solve a problem for one jurisdiction and you plug in, I mean, there's a lot of shared challenges that exist as we saw, right? And it doesn't mean that it's instantaneously portable to other communities, but I think if you understand the bigger picture of the dynamics that are happening in the market, you want to find a problem that's shared. Like we know cybersecurity is shared. It doesn't matter who you are, you're getting hit the same. So find things like that you can leverage that experimentation, that early success, and then scale it and focus on scale, because it can be very easy to customize something for one jurisdiction, and it becomes very, very difficult to apply that to another if it's just built for them. And so I think there's so much opportunity in this space right now. Governments, they have a lot of needs, but they also are really hungry for solutions and innovations and new ways of doing things. So it's a great time to either be a public servant or to be building a company around the space.
One last question. So climate change. So the pandemic has sort of pushed climate change off of the headlines, but that's still a big problem.
Yep.
What do you see government doing to address that, or what kind of help do they need to address that? Because I'm aside the peace, love, and happiness here, is like there's also sort of conflict, climate refugees, migration, disruptions that are going to occur, and that will if we aren't proactive about it, it will be reactionary, right? And it may take us to a place where we don't want to go. So how do we proactively imagine sort of a pro-social, lower the potential for conflict as these challenges come up?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And I mean, the encouraging thing is many state and local governments, stepped up and kind of put in place sustainability and climate change type regulations to really work on, having some type of a structure from a regulatory standpoint to hold themselves accountable if a state or federal agency wasn't going to do so. So I think, there's the regulatory side of things, there's the policy side of things when it kind of comes down into encouraging how to deal with those types of situations and the types of development that you want to look for. Same type of economic incentive for the right types of things as well, I think are really important. And then I think there's a lot more on, like, when you look at resiliency, right? We've seen a number of different programs that have been built around resiliency, and that often is just bucketed with disaster recovery and preparedness, but it's not just that. And so climate change has started to work its way into that as well, as we think about global resiliency and the role that government will play in that process and what we need to have. So I would say there's not a silver bullet that every agency is kind of latched onto yet. There's a lot of opportunity across those different buckets, and there's even a lot of investment. Like Urban.us is an angel investment firm that has invested in all kinds of amazing companies that that, that's kind of the underpinning of what they're trying to solve for. And it could be a skateboard company, or it could be a company that, that reduces, the amount of complexity in a government process. But at the end of the day, the output can be the same. So I think, that is something that agencies do need help with. I think that there's opportunities to collaborate with them to help frame the problem more so. And then probably from a policy and regulatory sandbox standpoint, that might be a good place to start. But definitely, technology comes in at the end of the day too.
So, because I'm wondering, because since government, the procurement is quite vast, right, in terms
Yeah.
of all their vendors. Okay, so here I am, simple-minded Margarita. I'm going like, what if in procurement you needed to show the carbon footprint of the thing that you were providing?
Yeah.
And then all
So
of a sudden you're looking at vendors and I've got vendor A and I've got vendor B, and it's the same thing. I love my iPods, my AirPods, by the way. I got the super ones and the little
you
screwy
don't have to
ones.
even recharge. You just put in a new pair.
Right. And exactly. That's what I did. I'm going, and I go, okay, I can buy this one, or I can buy this one. But this one has a significantly lower carbon footprint than this one. Otherwise, they're identical. I think I'm going to buy
Yep.
this one. Right.
So we have seen some innovation there from a procurement standpoint where they do evaluate those levels of detail. The problem is it's still not widespread from an adoption standpoint, but definitely some progressive agencies that have done that. We've seen the same types of things around data standardization and other things. So, I mean, if you want to standardize something in government, you're going to have to look at policy change probably on the procurement side so that you can ensure that the vendors, have that as a component of how they do business with government. So I think that is a really good way to go about it, but one that agencies need some help on. And they need to understand also, it's kind of this balancing act, right? Like they want to put those in place to ensure that those types of objectives are met, but they also don't want to disqualify, a little company that hasn't been able to quantify that what that is. Same thing like from an insurance standpoint, right? Like you require that they have $100 million liability insurance policy, but then that would disqualify the vast majority of little companies that are out there. So
but the trick is that what I find interesting about procurement and RFPs is it's a market signal. It's a market signal to entrepreneurs saying like, oh, you need this feature, right? And all the competition doesn't have that. And all I have to do is meet what the competition does and add this feature.
Yeah.
And
I think,
I think that can like spur a level of innovation where people are going like, oh, this is something the market values. So I'm providing this, I'm providing an app to government, and there are 3 other competitors, but I can say that my data center, the way I've coded this app, uses less energy.
Yep.
They're going like, it's sort of like Energy Star on your technology, right? Okay, you have Salesforce and you have SAP, and you're going like, oh, but Salesforce is Energy Star certified.
This one uses this much electricity a year. Yeah, no, I like that. I mean, I think we are going to see that level, especially as you look at standardizing, procurements and awards and those types of things, just understanding the true cost of these things and the long-term cost of them and making that transparent, I think will be, super important as we go forward. And I mean, I think, RFPs are a really good market signal, but there's also a lot of opportunity to educate government on market signals that they may not be seeing from the private sector that will influence them. So like, LA Metro, for example, has an unsolicited proposal mechanism where you can actually make proposals of them and you can share and educate them on better ways of doing things. So I think there's also some opportunity, not just to come in and say, hey, use this AI and it's going to make your life better, but that we call the shiny object syndrome. I think there's a way to also, if you recognize a challenge and you understand it and you understand the dynamics of the jurisdictions that you're talking to, it's perfectly fine to educate them on, hey, here is something that we see as an opportunity. Here's why it's beneficial to you. Here's how it fits into your environment or into the way of your the way you do things or your strategic plan or whatever it might be. So I think agencies have to be more open to that, but we are encouraged by the number of agencies that have opened the door to unsolicited proposals, just like what the federal government does for, research. And, the Defense Department does that as well for certain types of innovations where they just have categories and you can make a solicitation of them and say, hey, here's a white paper on something you might, be interested in. And they can actually take that into a procurement opportunity or into, an opportunity for a pilot or something else.
Cool. This has been fun. I'm
Yeah,
so
great
glad
catching
to
up.
catch up with you. Yeah. So for listeners, okay, I typically ask three things. Um, what people, people who are listening to this conversation, what should they um, learn? Okay, how do you want them to change how they think? What they should learn from this? Like, what's your call to and what do you want them to do? Your call to action. So you can think
It's a
about
good
that.
trifecta there. So from a
Learn. Okay, sorry. Learn, change, and
learn,
do. Yes.
learn, change, and do. All right. So
Yes.
learn, I mean, I would say one, learn more about the opportunity in state and local government and the opportunity, if you're in an adjacent space, to take what you're doing, to share that, to diffuse it, to build relationships, dialogue, collaboration with state and local government agencies, whether it's a partnership or whether it's just, kind of, something that you do on your own free time. Find some opportunity to do that. Change, I would say, you know, that kind of goes hand in hand with what I was going to say previously. Find ways to plug in to government, to change your approach to kind of neglecting them as a potential market for you. I would say, change your thinking as a part of that. And then from a do standpoint, I would say, do share what you're doing, share what you're working on. If you already have relationships and innovations and other things with government, I mean, part of my job is to diffuse those to the market. So, do share those with me. I'd love to kind of learn and share those with our wider audience as well. And I would just say, I would encourage you to have coffee with someone in a local government agency in a city that you live in. Just reach out to the city manager, reach out to the CIO, reach out to the someone that's on staff there in an area that's kind of adjacent to an interest area of yours, and just have a virtual coffee and just have a conversation and learn more about what they're doing and more about the role that they have, the challenges that they're facing. Just ask them about what happened over the last 11 months, right? And you're going to be incredibly inspired by just what these people have done, the sleeves that they've rolled up, the work that they've done in the trenches. And hopefully that will create an opportunity for, you to understand a little bit more so about the role that state and local government plays in the process, but also, maybe some inspiration for you to plug into that process, whether it's through a collaboration, being on a board, running for office, whatever it might be. There's so many ways that you can plug into increasing and building kind of a capacity for change and innovation in the government. And you don't have to be an employee of it. But yeah, I guess that would be my rambling way of saying those are the three things I'd focus on.
Okay, so where can people find you on social? Are you on Twitter?
Yeah, I am on Twitter. So it's just my first and last name, Dustin Haisler, Haisler. You can go to my website, dustinhaisler.com, and kind of check out some of the things that I'm reading, researching, and writing about. You can read more about kind of our work as a company at e.Republic.com. And then, definitely encourage, if you're interested in like GovTech, go to govtech.com. All of our stuff is free, so you can sign up for newsletters. You can see what government's doing with technology. If you're interested in the policy side of technology and government, go to governing.com and check out all of that great work as well. And then, if you have things you want to talk about or stories you want to tell, send me an email at dheisler@erepublic.com. And you can also find it on all the other stuff. Connect with me on LinkedIn. Always happy to have a virtual coffee or collaboration.
Fantastic. Thank you, Dustin.
All right. Good talking.